Well, Dorothy, here you are, 75 years old and in the clink. Again. Well, after 55 years in and out of some of the country's finest jails, I come prepared. My journal, my beloved Dostoevsky, and my Bible. Of course, I'd be lost without that. You know, they keep telling us this is not jail, it's an industrial farm. But we're not free to leave. Doors are locked. There's barbed wire and armed guards. Looks like jail to me. I hope you're not eating grapes, because that's why I'm in here and you're out there. I'm supporting Cesar Chavez and his people in their struggle against the grape growers. Have any of you been in jail? It's all hurry up and wait, like making a movie. Only the end result isn't usually as entertaining. I know about Hollywood. I worked there for a while as a scriptwriter. I've had a very checkered career, but first and foremost, I consider myself a journalist. And oh, did I travel with what I consider the best of the literati. Eugene O'Neill, Mike Gold, John Reed. We'd all gather in a little Greenwich Village bar nicknamed the Hellhole, and we'd sit around for hours and eat and drink and solve the problems of the world. Problems. My first time in jail, I went with my friend Peggy on the suffragist march to Washington, D.C. Now that was an education. Boys threw stones at us, men clucked their tongues in disapproval, and we were arrested. Now, come to think of it, that wasn't jail either. It was the workhouse. Mr. Whitaker, the workhouse keeper, finally showed up around 10 o'clock that night, and our spokeswoman, a Philadelphia mainliner, gave him hell. Mr. Whitaker, we are going on a hunger strike unless we are given our rights and transferred to the city jail away from this abominable workhouse. Shut up, you silly old cow. Boys! And guards piled into the room. I tried to get across the room to my friend Peggy. Where the hell do you think you're going? I was knocked down, kicked, and dragged in a state of shock to a cell block. My cellmate, Lucy Burns, a schoolteacher from Brooklyn, was handcuffed to the cell bars. Courage, girls! Don't give up the hunger strike! Shut up, you red-headed bitch, or I'll put a gag in your mouth. Or maybe you'd like a straitjacket? Oh, God. I'm so nauseous and dizzy. Oh, God, Lucy, how do you stand it? We haven't eaten in 6 days. It feels like 6 years. Oh, Dorothy, when they take you to the washroom, drink lots of hot water. It'll make your stomach feel full. I want a Bible. The Psalms and the hot water were my only comfort. On the 6th day, we were transferred to hospital cells. Finally, heat and light. My cell was next to Peggy's, and we'd pass notes written on toilet paper through a hole in the partition separating our cells. Peggy caved in. Dorothy, I can't do this. I am eating the milquetoast. Here, I'll pass you a piece of bread through the hole. No, I'm not giving in. Don't be stupid. They'll think you're still striking as long as they don't know you're eating. The way they're treating us, they deserve to be cheated. So I ate it. Oh, God, it tasted so good. On the 10th day, we won. We were transferred to the city jail to serve out the rest of our 30 days, given our clothes back, our mail, milquetoast, and chicken to eat. Search me out, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my restless thoughts. Look well into the shadows within me and lead me in the way everlasting. You know, I told myself I had read the Bible for literary enjoyment, not spiritual comfort. I've always been a fool, but I was a different kind of fool in those days. Since then, going to jail's become one of the themes of my life. There goes Dorothy Day being carted off to jail again. Sometimes I wonder, who was that young girl who thought she was such a wise woman? You know, as a child, we lived wherever my father's job as a journalist took us. One of my earliest memories was finding the Bible in our attic in San Francisco. My introduction to God. The earthquake put me in awe of him. Then finding my best friend's mother kneeling in prayer may be what planted the seed in me. I loved the prayers she taught me. Taught them to my sister Della, who would beg me to stop playing saints and let her get up off her knees. When we lived in Chicago, I walked my baby brother along with my sister Della through some of the worst parts of the city. And what struck me was the beauty I saw amidst all that poverty. I got a scholarship to the University of Illinois, but 2 years was enough for me, and off I went to New York to become a journalist, the last thing my father wanted me to be. I turned 20 and fell in love with Lionel Moyes. What did I know about love? I knew down deep that Lionel was wrong for me, but he never led me on. You know, what you need is a nice young man to marry who'll give you lots of babies and buy you a rubber tree plant. I don't want a rubber tree plant. I just want you and whatever you're able to give. Well, it won't be marriage. I don't want a wife or kids getting in my way. I don't need marriage, and I won't get in your way. Famous last words. I moved into Lionel's apartment on 35th Street in Manhattan. He had a job on Broadway, playing a drunk for $50 a week. Nice paycheck in those days. I look back and I can't believe the things I did for love. Lionel wouldn't let me work or even write. I was his woman. Of course, I was allowed to cook and darn his socks and wash his clothes. We'd argue and we'd split up for a while, and then I'd go back until he told me he was taking a job in Caracas. I'm pregnant. I'm sorry to hear it, but I'm going to Caracas. Well, what will I do about it? Get an abortion. I told you when we started, no wife and no kids. Yeah. Look, I know a place on the Upper East Side. You'll be fine. I'll meet you there when it's over. Oh, God. What have I done? He never showed up. When I got back to the apartment that night, I found a note with some money. Millions of women have had the same experience, and they lived. If you're smart, you'll find yourself a rich man and marry him. Well, I don't know how smart I was, but I found a rich man, Barclay Toby, one of the founders of the Literary Guild. Poor Barclay, I married him on the rebound, and that summer we went to Europe where I wrote a novel. We stayed until the following summer, and when we came home, the marriage was over. I found out Lionel was in Chicago, and off I went for more heartache and misery. I mean, he had no place in his life for me. Then, big surprise, I got a long-distance call. A movie company had bought the rights to my novel, The 11th Virgin. I got $3,000. The 11th Virgin. The title makes me cringe. I think that's the only reason they bought it. They never made the movie. The book was an embarrassing rehash of my affair with Lionel. It got terrible reviews. But I did have $3,000. A fortune to me in those days. A fortune to me these days. My friend Peggy, who was now Mrs. Malcolm Cowley, said, now, Dorothy, don't piss this money away. Invest it in a nice piece of land or a nice quiet little house where you can write. Well, for once I listened, and I bought a little beach house on Staten Island. God, how I love that place. It was my writer's haven. And I suppose I loved it for another reason. I ended up living there with the love of my life. Through Peggy and Malcolm, I met Foster Badderham. Foster, tall, lean, sandy-haired with his high forehead. He was of English descent, a biologist and an anarchist, totally opposed to religion and the institution of marriage. Now you might say, Dorothy, you are establishing a pattern here, falling in love with men who don't want to marry you. But Foster was different from Lionel. He loved me as much as I loved him, and I loved everything about him. I loved the way he smelled of the sea or salt air after a cold night of digging for bait or fishing on the bay. I loved his long, lean, chilly body when he got into bed with me. I loved the long walks we took together on the beach and the way he read the Times out loud to me at breakfast. And I loved him for his principles, for his hatred of economic injustice. Oh, he fit right in with my communist and socialist friends. I wasn't a card-carrying member of the party, but I admired their dedication to help the workers and the poor. I wasn't particularly religious at the time, but I used a rosary a friend had given me in New Orleans to recite the Te Deum, which I remembered from the Episcopal church I went to in Chicago. We praise thee, O God. We acknowledge thee to be the Lord. Of course, I didn't tell any of my communist friends I was indulging in the opiate of the masses. I'm not even sure why I did, but the way those beautiful words rolled off my tongue. All the earth doth worship thee, the Father everlasting. Heaven and earth are full of thy glory. Now, I didn't get down on my knees and pray, but on my walks, prayers just filled my head. Thou art the King of glory, O Christ. Thou art the everlasting Son of the Father. You know, if I started out on my walk feeling tired or blue, by the time I finished, I was filled with this most intense joy. There's no other word for it. Where it came from, I don't know, but on Sunday mornings, I started going to Mass. You see, I felt it was my life with Foster, this man who truly loved me, that brought me to God. How can that be? We're living in sin, if you believe, and I don't. Oh, Foster, how can you not believe? I mean, look at this beautiful world, this ocean, the way the sky lights up at dawn. You're in the city working all week. I write. I read Dickens and Dostoevsky. And then you come home on Fridays and we have our sails in the boat. Our love, Foster, do you remember when we went to the circus in Tottenville with Peggy and Malcolm? I've never felt so much in love, so secure, so happy. Because I was sure for the first time that day that I was pregnant. Oh, God, Dorothy, you know how I feel about bringing a child into a world like this, and how I hate the idea of control over another human being. Are you going to leave me? No, it's just that, well, I wouldn't be honest if I didn't tell you how I feel. Do you truly want this child? Yes, more than anything I do. Well then, we'll have it. Tamar Teresa was born the beginning of March after a long, hard winter. And during the months before her birth, I read The Invitation of Christ, and I decided, come what may, Tamar would be baptized. And Foster, well, once he was confronted with the reality of Tamar, he became the doting daddy. No human creature could receive or contain the love and the joy I so often felt after the birth of my child. It made me want to worship, to adore. I came to know God. One day when I was out walking by St. Joseph's home, I met Sister Aloysia, and I went up to her and I asked, how can I have Tamar baptized? She wasn't the least bit surprised by my question, but she had a question for me. How can you raise a daughter a Catholic if you don't become one yourself? She gave me a catechism and instruction 3 times a week, and she was one tough cookie. You think you're so intelligent. You don't even know the definition of sanctifying grace. My 4th graders know more than you do. Look at you. You sit around at your typewriter all day and your dishes are still in the sink. Unfortunately, if Foster was home and Sister Aloysia came to call, he would slam out of the house and go fishing. I kept hoping he'd reconcile himself. On the afternoon of Tamar's baptism, we all came back to the house for a lunch of garden vegetables and lobsters, which Foster had caught and made as his offering for the day. But he refused to eat with us, and he left. He was gone for days. And when he came back, things between us began to fall apart. We suffered through the executions of Sacco and Vanzetti, one point of our lives on which we still agreed, that these 2 men were being martyred. For days after the executions, Foster still stumbled through life, sickened and unable to eat. Tamar was his only delight. Now, I kept putting off the day when I would be received into the Catholic Church. But one day, shortly after Christmas, things came to a head. Look, I can't become a Catholic and go on living with you. I don't believe it. What difference would a piece of paper or some mumbo-jumbo words in a church make? Would that make us any more husband and wife than we've already been? This church that you so much want to be a part of, where was it when Sacco and Vanzetti were murdered? Whose side was it on, and whose side are you on? No, I'm just doing this for Tamar. I don't want her floundering and making the same mistakes I did. This way she'll have something solid and true to fall back on. Then don't you think you should wait until she's old enough to make that choice for herself? My God, you're turning your back on everything you believe in. Some champion of the workers and the poor you are. And he left me again. But this time when he came back, I wouldn't let him in the house. Dorothy, open the door. God, you know I'm not a man of violence, but sometimes you make me want to kick this door in. Now let me in, please. I can't. I've made an appointment with the parish priest, so I can't let you in. I won't let you change my mind. Foster? Foster! He was gone. On December 28th, I was received conditionally into the Catholic Church. Sister Elisha was my godmother. I didn't feel much joy in the sacraments. I went at them pretty grimly. I felt like a hypocrite getting down on my knees, terrified someone I knew might see me. Oh, don't think I've ever regretted becoming a Catholic. But for a long time, it was a lonely love affair. And love affair is exactly what it is. I think of St. Teresa, who was thrown from a donkey while crossing a stream, and as she lay in the muddy water, she looked up and saw Christ, and she shook her fist up at him. See how you treat your friends? No wonder you have so few of them. But what could she do? She was chosen. It's a hard, lonely life following Christ, as the Bible shows, from Jonah to St. Paul. If God chooses you, God help you. Not that I put myself in their company, God forbid. My conversion was a lonely struggle every step of the way. And I kept hoping to reconcile this struggle to help the workers and the poor. The country was sick with the Depression. I held body and soul together, writing a gardening column for the Staten Island Advance. Sometimes I managed to write articles for Commonweal and America. That's how I got to cover the Hunger March on Washington, D.C. This is what I wrote. They came in a procession of old cars and trucks that looked like something out of the Grapes of Wrath. For 3 days they were made to camp outside the Capitol while the powers that be decided whether or not Satan was at the gates. All these poor, starving marchers wanted were jobs, unemployment insurance, and health care. No one wanted to overthrow the government or deny anyone else. They just wanted human rights. Finally, on the 3rd day, the marchers were allowed to enter Washington. My heart was happy and proud as I watched them go by. But happy and proud as I was, Foster's words echoed in my mind. Where was the Catholic leadership in this parade? After the march was over, I went to the National Shrine at Catholic University. It was the feast of the Immaculate Conception. Because of construction, I had to go down into the crypt. The vaulted ceilings were low and dark, lit only by flickering of votive candles. I felt like a Christian in the catacombs. Dear God, I feel so useless. I've done nothing to help my brothers and sisters in their struggle for decent lives. There must be some way I can help. Please, God, show me how I can be of use. Please help me. I don't know what I expected God to do, and I certainly wasn't prepared for what he did do. Almost the moment I got back to New York, God's answer was waiting for me in my apartment. I am Peter Morgan. George Schuster, editor of the Commonwealth, said I should look you up. Also, a red-headed communist in Union Square said the same. You and I think alike. Lenin has said there can be no revolution without the theory of a revolution. I have a theory for a green revolution. We should build a new society where it is easier for people to be good, because when people are happy, they are good. And you are the one to help me with my revolution. I was so exhausted from my trip to Washington, all I could think was, this man is going to talk me to death. Please, could you come back another time? He was back the next day. You are a brilliant woman. The only thing your education lacks is a Catholic background. I can give you that. I will indoctrinate you not only in Catholic history, but in my program for a new society. God forgive me, I'm not a patient person, and I listened with half an ear only out of politeness at first. But when he said, let's start a paper for the man in the street, for the workers and the poor, I knew my prayer had been answered. Not that I still didn't have my doubts. How do we start this paper? I only enunciate the principles. Oh, that's very grand, but we need money. God will send it. Read the lives of the saints. When you need it, the money will come. Well, I had $57, so I won't pay the bills. A group of us put together an 8-page tablet, which we went out on the street and sold for a penny a copy. Our first run was 2,500 copies. We were an overnight success. 6 months later, we were up to 25,000. And by 1936, we were up to 150,000 copies of The Catholic Worker. Peter said, we should call it The Catholic Radical. Oh, Peter, if we're radical the way St. Francis was radical. I'm not St. Francis. Oh, I don't know about that. You have no money. You have no property. You've wandered the world doing everything from digging ditches and quarrying stone to working in steel mills and coal mines. You're not a lazy person, Peter, and you rejoice in your poverty. We're both hard workers, Peter, thus the Catholic worker. Man proposes, woman disposes. I've been praying a long time for someone like you. You are the new Catherine of Siena. She gave the Pope's hell. I know you'll do the same. Well, I don't know about that, but over the years, I've had my run-ins with the Catholic hierarchy. I picketed St. Patrick's Cathedral when the gravediggers went on strike. Cardinal Spellman called them communists. I wrote him a note requesting an interview, telling him they were no more communist than he was. I was ignored. He made the seminarians dig the graves, and he broke the strike. In 1951, he sent Monsignor Gaffney to us. Miss Day, with all due respect, the Cardinal would like you to change the name of your paper. To what? Anything but The Catholic Worker. Well, I would be most willing, but there are people who've worked on this paper for over 18 years. They may not agree. No one has asked the Catholic War veterans to change their name. But you're so dogmatic in your point of view. Well, then I must try to change. But suppressing the paper is not the answer. Now, I would be most happy to sit down and discuss this personally with Cardinal Spellman, whom I so greatly admire. Even I know when to use honey instead of vinegar. Well, Monsignor Gaffney left. I was not called in, and it was business as usual at the Catholic Worker. But that was later on. Let me read you one of Peter's easy essays, which he had printed in the Catholic Worker. Peter wrote on any scrap of paper he could find. I think this one came wrapped around liverwurst. The world would be better if people tried to become better, if they stopped trying to become better off. Everybody would be rich if nobody tried to become richer. And nobody would be poor if everybody tried to be poorest. And everybody would be what he ought to be if everybody tried to be what he wants the other fellow to be. Peter said, we should start a house of hospitality. Oh, Peter, my house is already a house of hospitality. There's always a pot of coffee or stew on the stove. They're already halfway there. No, Peter, we can't. There's no room. This apartment is already bursting at the seams. That night, 2 women came knocking at the door, desperate for a place to sleep. I turned them away. There was no room. The next day, one of the women came back. The other woman had committed suicide. That did it. We managed to get the use of 2 buildings on Mott Street. And as simply as that, we started on Peter's phase 2. We took in everyone, the deserving and the undeserving. The cross on the wall was the only sign of our faith. We never preached, but would always listen. We feed the hungry, yes, and we tried to give them food and clothes and a place to sleep. But there's a strong faith at work here. We pray. And if outsiders come to visit and don't pay attention to our praying and what it means, then they miss the whole point. You see, when we feed the hungry, they call us saints. When we ask why they are poor, they call us communists. Some social workers weren't too happy with us. They said we took in too many drunkards and thieves for their taste without trying to force them to change. They stayed as long as they wanted. Some moved on. Others stayed until we buried them. And if anyone got sanctimonious about what we did, I'd tell them, the odor of sanctity at St. Joseph's house is the smell of kerosene we use to kill the bedbugs. My own pride often got a check, too. I remember one time I took a dress out of the clothing room so I'd have something decent to wear when I met Mother Teresa. We were standing on line, my friend standing beside me. She said, Dorothy, are you all right? You keep rubbing your chest. Are you having a heart attack? No, it's just this dress I took out of the clothing room. Oh, has little critters in it. But that was a minor annoyance. Phase 2 of Peter's Green Revolution was a smashing success. It was phase 3 where we ran into trouble. Peter said, we should buy a farm and raise what we eat and eat what we raised. So we bought a little farm on Staten Island. Unfortunately, Peter did most of the work. There were plenty of people to eat what was raised, but not to raise what was eaten. Later on, we bought a farm in Newburgh, New York. But our farm ventures were never as successful as we hoped they'd be. But our farm problems were nothing compared to the rise of Franco and Hitler. People said they loved the Catholic worker movement before we got involved with the communists and this pacifist thing. Well, anyone who ever read the paper knows we were always involved in this pacifist thing. We support the works of mercy, not the works of war. And when we encouraged young men not to register for the draft, I was called into Cardinal Spellman's office, who said, "You've gone too far this time." Well, perhaps I had. We got through World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust, but we lost so many young men and women. And when they dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, I wept for us all. Some even gave God credit for the bomb. They gave the atom bomb test project the code name Trinity. What a mockery of our Lord, rejoicing in the vaporizing of men, women, and children. Christ came to save us, not to destroy. The war years were full of losses. My mother died in October 1945. She said, "Dorothy, I've lived through 2 world wars, the San Francisco earthquake, and a Florida hurricane. That's enough. I'm ready to go." "Dorothy?" "Yes, Mother." "What about the afterlife?" "Oh, Mother, I can't imagine the afterlife any more than a blind man can imagine colors. But look at the bouquet of violets by your bedside, their beauty and their scent. Soon they'll fade as they do in the ground, but next spring they'll be back again. And the trees, this fall, the heart could break from how beautiful they were. Now the leaves are all gone, but next spring they'll be back again. They're a promise from God, and God keeps his promises." "Dorothy, I can only pray the Creed and the Our Father. Is that enough?" "Yes, Mother, that's enough." My daughter Tama was always a wonder of wonders to me. She still is. But sometimes I worried that life as a Catholic worker was too much for her. There were always so many people in and out, places to go, things to do. Tama was always a clingy child, and one day we were walking along Mott Street and Tama was holding on to me, and God forgive me, I lost my patience. "Tama, you're going to have to learn independence." Well, those words came back to haunt me very soon. "Mama, I'll soon be 16 and I want to get married." "No, I forbid it." Romeo and Juliet were only 13, and look what happened to them. 18 will be time enough. I agreed to let her go to St. Martin's, a craft school, and when she came home that summer, she fell in love with David Hennessy, one of the new volunteers. And no matter what I did to keep them apart, Tama was stubborn. I wonder where she got that. "Mama, if you don't let me marry David now when I'm 18, I will." Well, in April of 1945, soon after Tama's 18th birthday, she and David were married. It was a Catholic worker wedding in every way. There was no running water, so Tama had to wash herself in a bucket. No mirror, so she never got to see how beautiful she looked. And Peter kept following me around, reciting the speech he planned to make at Tama's wedding. Look, I don't have time for this. poor Peter meekly turned the other cheek and started down the road to the church. I got into a borrowed car. Peter, get in, please. I'm sorry I was so rude, but my only daughter is getting married, and I don't have time to discuss pig farming for profit. Oh, Mama, he's going to make his speech, isn't he? Oh, Tama, it wouldn't be a Catholic worker wedding if he didn't. Mama, you know I love Peter, but he goes on. And anyway, David and I have no intention of raising pigs. You know, Peter, you don't have to make your speech at Tamar's wedding. Why don't you just relax and enjoy yourself? Of course, Peter did not take the hint. He made his pigs for profit speech, and we all laughed. But we listened too. The following spring, Tamar presented me with Rebecca, the first of my 9 grandchildren. And poor darling Peter, his pigs for profit speech was his last. His memory began to go. He dragged himself through the next 5 years, and we used to pin notes on his clothes because he would wander off and get lost. The last time I saw Peter alive, I thank God I could make him smile. Peter, do you remember Larry Heaney? Yes, I do. Well then, you have someone waiting for you in heaven. The undertaker tried to sell me artificial grass to cover the unsightly earth of Peter's grave. Peter did not find the earth unsightly. He loved working in it with his hands. Miss Day, when we dug Peter's grave, we cut through the roots of a little tree. Perhaps we should remove the tree? No, don't do that. How wonderful to know that Peter will nourish this thing of beauty, this little tree. I know, Peter, dear friend, you're watching over us. How else did we get through the fabulous 50s with the McCarthy witch hunts? When Dorothy Day became Moscow Mary because she stood by her old friends? And how about the madness of air raid drills and bomb shelters in a nuclear age? It was really laughable when the teachers made the students kneel down in the halls with their hands over their heads to keep them safe from the atom bomb. Peace is the only safety from the atom bomb. Ammon Hennessy, who for an anarchist was one of the most organized people I have ever met, a group of sympathizers and myself defied the air raid laws when the sirens went off. Of course, we were dragged off to court, and Judith Malina, the actress, refused to call the judge Your Honor. Miss Malina, have you ever been in a mental institution? No. Have you? Down came the gavel, and off poor Judith went to Bellevue. For the next 6 years, defying the air raid laws and going to jail became our rite of spring. Our last protest was in 1961. By then, even the newspapers were laughing at the drills. Thousands were joining the protest. This was a harbinger of things to come. The 60s were upon us. So many sad and terrible things happened in the 60s. The assassinations, John F. Kennedy, his brother Bobby, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. But the worst thing was the Vietnam War. So many soldiers and civilians were killed or maimed thanks to such wonderful weapons like napalm. What kind of mind thinks up napalm, this chemically treated gasoline that sticks to the skin while it burns? And who makes it? And then goes home and has dinner with his family? Of course, Wall Street loved the war. It added zip to the economy, channeling billions of dollars into pocketbooks across the country. Well, not at the Catholic worker. I only wish more people felt the same as we did. I know the Pope did. He made a plea for peace. But not Cardinal Spellman, oh no. The good Cardinal demanded total victory in Vietnam. I mean, couldn't he see his words were as evil as napalm? He should have been reminding us that we are all one and God has commanded us to love one another. I joined the Catholic Church because it was a church of the poor. I think the good Cardinal forgot how many pennies from poor immigrants were sent that helped build the great cathedrals he preached in every Sunday. And I think he forgot how many of our children, especially from poor families, were sent to Vietnam and were dying. And I think he forgot how many Vietnamese people were dying. Well, I wasn't forgetting, and I was damn well going to remind him and all the others who forgot the poor carpenter who is still the body and blood of our church. I still feel, regardless of the wealth and the great cathedrals, the Catholic Church is still a church of the poor, where sinners find forgiveness. We must never forget. The church is the cross on which Christ is crucified, and Christ cannot be separated from his cross. Christ was born in poverty, he died in poverty, and we must never, never forget his greatest commandment, that we love one another. Oh, I got carried away. Whenever I get a chance, I get on a soapbox and make a fool of myself, a fool for Christ. But that's why I'm here, with Cesar Chavez and his people. When I'm out picketing with them, I tell the policemen, lay down your guns, we don't hate you. If you don't lay down your guns, when we come back tomorrow, I'm going to read you the Sermon on the Mount. Since I've been picketing with Cesar 1969. We've been shot at, almost run down by cars, seen our workers cut on their faces with grape scissors, kicked in the ribs and beaten. Victories have been small, but now at least some workers have a restroom and a place to wash their hands. Before that, they had to do their business in the fields. Think about that if you're eating grapes tonight. This time, we were put in jail, the industrial farm, for remaining at a scene of riot, rout, and unlawful assembly. 99 of us are women, 50 men, 30 of us nuns, and 2 priests. And we haven't wasted the time we've been here. We've had prayer vigils and labor seminars, and Joan Baez has come to sing to us. You know, there is a rumor going around that we're going to be released today. Well, if that's true, the authorities aren't going to be too happy with me. You see, people have been autographing my prison dress, and I want to keep it as a souvenir. Oh, I know they're going to tell me it's the property of the state, but just let them try to get it back. Oh, we are being released. Well, back to the battle. You know, the great Aldous Huxley, an incredibly brilliant man, was once asked what we could do to save the human race. His answer was to ask, why can't we all be a little nicer to one another? I second Mr. Huxley. Love is the measure by which God will judge us in the end. I hope you'll remember that. You can do it in little ways, like Saint Therese of Lisieux, the saint of the little way. Little kindnesses to one another. You might even start a revolution. But remember, the challenge is to have a revolution of the heart. And it must begin with each one of us. Well, I better get packed and out of here and see what foolishness I can get up to now. And remember, don't buy grapes. It's just a little thing, but it's a start.